Hello there. This is my compass. There was a time when I did not carry a compass. And there's a story behind this compass. And I think it's time I told it. I have been a hunter, a fisherman, basically been in the outdoors since I was small. Okay. Um, I guess I gravitated toward it because I grew up in the uh, South. My mom and dad were divorced, and you know, she ended up having to find work to take care of us because she was on her own, and I had a lot of time to myself, and being a country boy, the woods was my playground, and so I kind of prided myself on my sense of direction, on knowing, where I was going and where I was at and how to get back and stuff like that. And I spent decades where I never had a problem. Okay. But the reason for that is that I was intimately familiar with where it was that I was at. Okay. I did grow up in those woods and I know them or I knew them. Okay. But when I moved to Virginia, Virginia is a different place. Uh, it's a bit more mountainous, although I lived at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains at the very beginning of where they start, not in the mountains, but at the foothills of it. And those mountains, I hunted in those mountains many a year. Um, but when I got up to Virginia, I didn't have any place to hunt. I didn't know anybody that hunted. I was new to the area. I had no clue. And then I met a friend, and he was a hunter. And we got to know each other, and hunting season started rolling around, and he started talking about hunting season. And I said, I'd love to go hunting. I haven't been able to, hunt since I got to Virginia. And he said, well, come on, we'll go hunting. I've got plenty of places to go, yada, yada, yada. So I was like, yeah, man, let me go down to the pawn shop and buy me a used rifle and let's go hunting. And we hunted together for years. And between the two of us, he had a good sense of direction and he was well familiar with where we were because he grew up here. And so between the two of us, we never had a problem finding our way out of the woods back to the vehicle, that kind of deal. Okay, but I remember one year, like mid '80s, late '80s, um, 1980s, if you know what I mean. And we were hunting on some in the national forest. Um, and what it was is he had a friend who had an old farm that was no longer a working farm, but it backed up to the Shenandoah National Forest, backed up to the mountain. Okay, and so we accessed the national forest from his backyard, the backyard of his farm, the back area, the back lot, whatever you want to call it, of his farm. And so we hunted that like a week. And then Saturday came along And for some reason, he had to work and he couldn't get out of it. So I got up 4 o'clock Saturday morning and got ready and had my breakfast and all of that jazz and rolled up into that farm that, and parked my vehicle and climbed up into the mountains before the sun came up. So I got up there and I hunted all day. I climbed. Keep in mind, I've been hunting that place for a week. Okay. And it got time. I started realizing it's like, and this is wintertime, so it gets dark 6 o'clock, 6:30. The sun goes down. In the woods, it gets dark a lot faster. So I'm in the forest, and I've been there all day because I don't, a lot of guys, they would stop for lunch, and then they would wait till like 3 o'clock, and they'd roll back out at 3 o'clock. And I stayed in the woods all day because there have been many a time when everybody else thought the deer weren't moving, that because I stayed where I was and they got up and moved, they pushed a deer toward me, and I got a deer. Okay. So I always stayed in the woods. So I'd been up there all day. I started looking around and realizing that it was starting to get close to getting dark. So I thought I better climb my way down this mountain and go back to the car, right? The only problem is when I started looking around, I realized that I had absolutely no idea where I was. I didn't have a map. I didn't have a compass. I didn't have anything to tell me what my direction had been. And besides, when you're hunting, you tend to move all over the place. And by the time it's time to go home, you're pretty much, unless you know that area or you have some way of recognizing the direction that you've traveled, that kind of deal, then, you can get lost. And there was 1.5 2 foot of snow on the ground. So I started trying to retrace my steps, trying to figure out how to get down off of that mountain, but it was getting darker, and I started beginning to not be able to even see my footsteps in the snow. And so I was well and truly lost. So I did what most sportsmen are taught, most hunters are taught, which now it seems like nobody flipping remembers, but there's a kind of a universal signal for help, and it's 3 blows on a whistle, 3 shots with a rifle, whatever, just 3. You hear 3 loud sounds in rapid succession. Someone needs help. Okay. The problem with that is the area that I had butted up to, that farmland is private property. No one else was allowed, and it was a huge spot of land. So everybody up on that back ridge, it was difficult to get to that area if you couldn't get through that guy's property. So there wasn't anybody else up there. So I tried that. Nothing. Okay. And I started looking, listen, keep in mind, I had no compass. I had nothing to start a fire with except my cigarette lighter, but it didn't matter because I was a heavy smoker at that time. But it didn't matter because everything was wet, under snow, that kind of deal. So starting a fire was not going to happen. It's fall. So anyway, I began to think, well, I've got to find a place. I can't, it basically got almost so dark that I couldn't see. And I was thinking, I have got to find shelter of some kind. And now, keep in mind that I'm a country boy, but I always have been able to go home. And I didn't really have any training in how to survive in a situation like that. This incident caused me to get some training on it. Okay, but so I didn't have a bedroll, I didn't have a tent, I didn't have any kind of shelter, I didn't have any kind of anything I could make fire with in damp conditions. I had nothing. Okay, covered in snow, temperature was in the 30s and dropping fast. So I look around and I'm like, well, I need to find shelter. And what I saw was a rock ledge that was hanging out of the side of the mountain. And I thought, well, I'll gather some kind of brush. Good luck with that. There's snow everywhere, but I'll find something I can shove up under there, and then I'll crawl up under that, and I'll get through the night. I'll be cold, but hopefully I can stay warm enough that I can get through the night. And then I'll figure out how to get out in the morning. And then I began to realize that I heard water, running water. And I followed the sound of the running water, and I found a creek or a stream that was going down the side of the mountain. And here in North America, if you're up on a mountain, if you go down, you usually run into civilization, particularly if you find water that's going down, because the water comes down from the mountain and people build where there's water. So you usually can find some type of civilization if you go down the mountain. And so I had a little bit of moonlight, and it was just enough that would glint on that water, and I could slowly work my way down the side of that mountain. And I got about 2/3 of the way down. It was like 3 hours later, because I had to go really, really slow, or, I mean, it was rocky. I could have broke my leg, all kind of stuff if I wasn't careful. I tried to hurry, and I realized that was a bad idea, so I crawled down that mountain basically as slowly as I could, as fast as I dared, but that was still really slow. And when I got about, I think, 2/3 of the way down the side of that mountain, I happened to look straight down at the mountain, and I saw this tiny little pinpoint of light. And I realized that's probably somebody's back porch light. And so I followed that creek bed and that light all the way down the side of that mountain. About 11:30 at night, I finally got down to where they were, knocked on the farmer's door. And he came to the door, and I told him I was lost, and can I come in and use it, because there wasn't any cell phone or any such thing like that. And use your phone to get somebody, call somebody to come get me, that yada yada. I called my friend, he came out, picked me up, we went back, got my car, all that, everything's fine, right? So when I got to thinking about that in the next few days, began to realize that if I had tried to make it through the night up underneath that ledge on cold ground, then I would have died right up there on top of that mountain. You wouldn't see this video. None of the content that I put on YouTube would exist. I would just be dead. And someone somewhere along the next few months, my family wouldn't know where I was or what had happened. And in the next few months or so, maybe somebody might have found my body, and maybe they'd have had a little bit of closure. But I realized then that I had to do something, because I almost died on that mountain, because I thought that I was smarter than I was. I thought, because I know what you're saying. Oh, I know my way around where I'm at. I don't need a compass. Come on now. You know, I'm Mr. Woodsman. I've never been lost. Well, I had never been lost either. But buddy, that one time it would have been enough to kill me. If Providence had not looked down on me, if the Lord had not shined down on me and shown me a way down out of that mountain, if I had not figuratively and literally seen the flipping light, I would not be here right now. And so, after I began to think about it a while, the first thing I did was go down to the local general store, because we didn't have Walmart, we didn't have hardly anything at that time here in this little town. I had Stokes General Store, and you know, IGA grocery, Food Line, that kind of deal. And I think we had a sporting goods, the Bill's Sporting Goods was there at the time. But I went down to Stokes's, and I bought this compass. Now this, by today's standards, this compass cost about 25 bucks when I bought it in the 80s. It's a plastic case. It's not a very expensive compass, but it is accurate. The way I use one, accuracy is not a big deal. Uh, the way that I learned to use this. You might say, well, I don't know how to read a compass. Well, I didn't either, but I do know that if I open this compass up and hold it in my hand, it'll point north, and north is that way. Okay, so just knowing maybe the direction that I traveled, that I started traveling in, it's better than nothing. And there are methods, and there's a method that I will maybe show you at a later date if I can find an area of woods that I can do it in. But there's a method I'll show you later on that if you get completely turned around, and I mean completely turned around, and you don't have any clue where you're at, that you can find your way out. You can find your way to civilization. You can find your way somewhere to where you need to be to get out of the woods. But listen, I told this story to try to help you to understand that if you're a woodsman, you should own one of these. You should own one of these. You should learn how to use it at least on a basic level. You don't have to learn to read a map and use a compass on a map, although I'm slowly learning that now, and that will be videos coming up in several months when I get to where I'm proficient enough with using a compass and a map. I may do some videos on that. Okay, basic kind of land navigation. I know I'm 60 years old, maybe it's a little late for me to try to learn that, but I'm still entering into the woods, and I'll be up in the woods until I can't get out of my seat anymore, if I have anything to say about it, because I love the forest. So you need a compass, and you need to learn basic. What I'm going to do is I have a video why I prefer a compass and a map and a compass. Because I don't use a compass with a map. Like, I don't take bearings off a map and then plot a course. But I like maps because a map will tell me that area. I can see that area. I can see its shape. I can see what is in this direction, that direction, yada, yada, yada. And that, along with the knowledge of what direction I'm traveling, and a compass will allow me to get back to my vehicle, back to civilization safely. And that has not failed me since that first incident when I didn't have this. I can remember at least twice, and I'm pretty sure there's been 2 or 3 more times that I don't remember. But I can remember at least 2 distinct times where this has saved Fat Boy's bacon. Okay? You need a compass, and you need to learn basic rudimentary dead reckoning. And I will do a video specifically just about that at some point. But I thought that I would tell my story because I think it's important for people to understand it doesn't matter how long it is you've been going into the woods without a compass. If you keep going into the woods without a compass, one of these days you're going to get turned around in those woods and you're not going to be able to figure out how to get out. If it's spring or summer, because see, that's another thing. One of the times that I did get lost when I had this compass, I was in an area that I had hunted for a couple decades, okay? But I hunted it, okay? That means I was in it in the winter time. In the spring and the summer, I got lost in late spring in that area. In spring and summer, The woods are much thicker in Virginia. In the wintertime, the leaves are off the trees, that kind of deal. Okay, it's much more open. In the summertime, in the springtime, everything's closed up. It doesn't look anything like what it looks like in the wintertime. And so basically what I did was I went into an area that I did not know, believing that I knew it, and got lost. But I had this. And it took me very little time to figure out how to get back to my vehicle and go home and crawl into a nice warm bed after I had a big fat supper. And okay, you need a compass. You need to learn basic use of it. Bless you. I'll talk to you later.